Her eyes don't blink. Standing tall, fully made up and proud, she watches the chaos unfolding in the streets and stares at her own end through the window. The army has taken over the square and is drawing near, bringing a sentence with a set time, and still, no cry for mercy echoes through the palace walls. Down below, horses' hooves strike the ground with uncontrollable fury. Dust hangs thick in the heavy air. The palace stands frozen. No servant stands with her, no voice offers comfort, no God replies. The hallways are deserted, the doors hang ajar, eyes that once bowed before her now avoid even her shadow. She, who once embodied supreme authority, is now nothing more than the final punctuation mark in a story the court itself seems eager to bury. No one is by her side. Everyone knows what is about to happen, and no one tries to stop it. The woman who once ruled through fear over an entire kingdom is now ignored by all who once served her. This is not just the end of a queen, it is the end of a macabre era, and the beginning of a brutal cleansing. She has become ruins, and everyone understands the world is finally correcting a mistake. Why was this death inevitable? What forgotten prophecy is being fulfilled here? How does a queen reach such an end, without honor, without a funeral? This story isn't just about the fall of a monarch, it's about the moment God decides to wait no longer, when every act of arrogance reaches its breaking point. Only by watching until the very end will you uncover, in rarely told detail, why this death couldn't have been avoided. And a revelation in the final minutes ties this ancient story to the present, showing that some old cycles haven't been closed, they still repeat themselves, silently, disguised, and dangerously active all around us. She has just crossed the gates. The procession from Tyre is welcomed with pomp, but the new queen doesn't smile. She watches, measures every face, every structure, every symbol of the faith that dominates this land. None of her gestures are accidental, every step carries a hidden intent, and a veiled threat. Jezebel arrives not merely as the king's wife, but as the extension of her father, Ethbaal, king, high priest of Baal, lord of Tyre, political strategist and architect of spiritual alliances. Unlike other queens, Jezebel wasn't chosen, she was strategically placed, and now, Ethbaal's blood pulses at the heart of Israel's throne. The first moves happen out of public sight. Deals made in quiet hallways, old servants are replaced with faces from the Phoenician coast. Names change, so do vows. Prophets of the God of Israel begin to disappear, some flee to survive, others simply vanish, and those who remain no longer dare to speak. Altars to Baal rise where holy places once stood. The worship of Asherah, with its rites of sensuality and feminine power, gains prominence in the very heart of the capital. The people watch, confused. The ancient symbols of the covenant are covered by foreign tapestries. They are still there, but hidden now, sidelined. The replacement is precise and calculated. Ahab watches, mesmerized. His will is no longer his own. Jezebel doesn't raise her voice, yet everything moves around her. Her commands are whispered, her actions disguised as progress. She rarely smiles, but persuades with a glance, and the kingdom, slowly, begins to yield. What appears to be diplomatic progress is, in truth, a demonic infiltration. Baal, the god of storms and fertility, is exalted as the giver of rain, harvest, and stability. The people, worn out by political crises and recurring droughts, give in. The Phoenician gods seem like a viable alternative. Jezebel knows it, and she uses every need as an argument, every weakness as an open door. But there is something deeper at stake, a battle not in the palace halls, but in the soul of the people. The faith that once sustained Israel in the desert, in the Exodus, in the promises to Abraham, is now being traded, not by force, but by seduction. There is no visible resistance, but unease begins to creep in. Eyes shift, leaders go silent, faithful priests vanish. The city breathes a different air, heavier, thick with a presence that cannot be seen, but is deeply felt. This is more than a political alliance, it is a quiet transfer of power, an invasion that uses no armies, only priests. That doesn't destroy temples, only replaces their gods. Something is moving, settling in without warning. The reign is cautiously changing hands, but no one seems to notice. The choices are being made in silence, but the judgment they bring will not be silent. Jezebel continues to advance, and with every move, another boundary is crossed. Time to react is running out, and the one question that remains, whispered in the alleys of the city, is this: who will have the courage to stop what has already begun? There is no more innocence in the palace. Fake smiles replace warnings, footsteps echo rhythmically through the corridors, and servants go about their shifts. Power still has a public face, but its true strength hides behind another crown. Then, within King Ahab, a desire arises, and a problem. His interest meets an obstacle with a known name, Naboth. His vineyard, modest but symbolic, catches the king's attention, a piece of land inherited, cultivated, and guarded as part of his family's identity, but it stood in the wrong place, right next to the palace. Ahab makes his offer. He wants to buy it. Naboth refuses with the calm assurance of one who knows the law and fears God. Inherited land is not for sale, but that kind of answer no longer finds safety in the new atmosphere taking shape, and so, he would have to disappear. Faced with rejection, Ahab sulks like a spoiled child. He refuses food, withdraws from his duties, lies down with his face to the wall, drowned in sullen silence. His power, when confronted with Naboth's faithfulness, reveals itself to be weak, childish, and pathetic. Jezebel watches with impatience and takes the matter into her own hands. She doesn't question the refusal. Her reading of the situation presents an opportunity. So she writes letters in the king's name, seals them with his ring, and sends them to the nobles and officials of Naboth's city, Jezreel. She disguises the command under the pretense of religious zeal. A public fast is proclaimed, as if the people need to purge some collective guilt. Naboth is placed where everyone can see him, unaware of the ambush about to unfold. At a given moment, two voices suddenly break the ceremony's flow. Seated deliberately in front of Naboth, two scoundrels, men whose integrity was never required, only their willingness to lie, stand up and accuse him. He had cursed both God and the king. No evidence is asked for, no defense is allowed. The people, already attuned to the new rhythm of power, accept it with resignation. Naboth is dragged outside the city and thrown into a dusty clearing. With no time to react, he sees the stones fall, one after another, like part of a necessary ritual. His body, strong at first, gives in with the first impact. Blood mingles with the dust, and the ground is stained red, and the law, manipulated from the beginning, signs off on its first injustice. The next day, with news of the execution confirmed, Jezebel approaches Ahab as if offering a gift. The vineyard is available, there is no longer any opposition. The king rises, composed once again, he eats, then marches to the vineyard as if nothing had happened. The land remains, but what it stood for was buried with its owner. And the truth? The truth was replaced by a carefully staged public ritual. Naboth was the first, but he would soon stop being the exception. From that moment on, the kingdom changes. Injustice becomes institutionalized. The prophets of Baal take places of honor. The prophets of Yahweh find hiding places. Altars are redesigned. Idolatry, once subtle, becomes a spectacle. The people's faith is reshaped by new messages, new images, new rules. Those who don't adapt disappear. Those who watch learn to look the other way. Israel's altar, once the symbol of God's covenant with his people, is now the heart of a rival worship. The words of the Torah have been replaced with Phoenician incantations. True spiritual authority is hollowed out. Justice is tainted. Jezebel needs no titles to reign. Her rule advances through subtle shifts and symbolic control. Religion becomes a tool of submission, worship, a show of manipulation. God's name is still spoken, but its weight has been drained. What's repeated now are soulless phrases, empty gestures, hollow ceremonies. Naboth's vineyard wasn't merely seized, It became the opening act of a system that twists rituals to legitimize injustice and manufacture reverence. It was the rehearsal of a new regime, one more refined, more discreet, and far more lethal, and it would soon find its next target. It wasn't Naboth's execution that shook the kingdom, it was what it revealed: the total surrender of a people, the collapse of conscience, the formalization of fear, the legitimization of a system that no longer pretended to be just. Justice was no longer an ideal, but a ghost. Jezebel didn't need more allies. Her grip was now structural, and she seemed untouchable. Far from there, across the warm sands of the desert, a nondescript man walks toward them, a man with no crown, no army, no title, but with a name that would never be forgotten: Elijah. Alone, without armor or entourage, he carries a weary body but a soul on fire. He brings an unbearable message to the sensitive ears of the king and the queen. Without asking permission, he summons their gods to a showdown, and he doesn't pick a quiet corner. High on Mount Carmel, where the land already serves strange gods, Elijah issues the challenge: let the gods speak, let them answer with fire, and those who can't, let them be silent forever. Before a crowd numbed by empty rituals, an unprecedented duel begins, not against soldiers, but against deception. He gathers the people, summons the idolatrous priests, dares the heavens. The God who answers by fire, he is the true one. Baal has his chance. For hours, his prophets dance, cry out, cut themselves, bleed. Still, the altar remains untouched. Time turns into a cruel enemy, and their God remains deaf. The people's faith begins to waver. Then Elijah steps forward, one man, standing before a divided crowd. He rebuilds the abandoned altar of the Lord, stone by stone. On it, the wood and the bull for the sacrifice. With everything ready, he orders the whole area to be drenched in water, sending a clear message: there will be no tricks. The miracle will be undeniable and unstageable. Then he prayed, brief and direct. Heaven, silent for years, answers with force. Fire falls and consumes everything in sight: the offering, the altar, the water, the soil. Everything is scorched, and with it, the illusion vanishes. The people fall to the ground, prostrate, worshiping the true God. Elijah doesn't hesitate. He commands the capture of all Baal's prophets, who are dragged into the valley. None survive. The vengeance is total. Now the system turns on itself and sheds its first drops of blood. The queen is symbolically wounded, but still breathing. Jezebel wastes no time with mourning. She immediately sends a message to the prophet: he will meet the same end, within 24 hours. Elijah disappears into the desert like a fleeing shadow. And at that moment, she seems to defeat him without even touching him, proving just how far her influence reaches. Once again, victory appears to be hers, swelling her ego and her illusion of invincibility. But God's prophet still has something left to say, and the next prophecy from his lips will mark the date of the queen's final summons to her chamber. No threat to royal authority seems to remain. Jezebel continues untouchable, as if the gods still poured her wine and time itself obeyed her commands. Elijah is still gone, but not everything that vanishes disappears. Sometimes, what seems to fade only spreads. A murmur still lingers in the air, invisible, unsettling, and persistent. That man she believed crushed without lifting a finger, hadn't spoken his last word. The day unfolds uneventfully in the vineyard that once belonged to Naboth, when its new owner arrives. King Ahab is there to formalize his possession when he receives an entirely unexpected visit. Elijah is standing before him with a message, and what came from his mouth wasn't a warning, it was a promise. The dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a cruel and precise description, the kind of end no one announces lightly. There was no anger in his voice, just a pronouncement from someone who had seen the end first. But after that, nothing happens. Time doesn't cooperate. Years pass, Elijah is gone. The prophecy is forgotten, overtaken by the relentless pace of time. Jezebel remains in the palace, still painting her face, still plotting her domain, still signing decrees, still surrounded by gold, incense, and glory, untouchable, unshaken. But the sentence was never revoked. The countdown continues, and its deadline is closing in. While Jezebel smiles at banquets and orchestrates alliances, the clock of her end keeps ticking, slowly but relentlessly. What she thought she had silenced is now walking straight toward her. Her existence already has an expiration date. She just doesn't know which morning she will wake up to meet it. But the day never came, not that week, not that month, not even that year. Jezebel woke up, lived, and gave orders. She continued to be called queen, continued to be feared, served, and revered. The palace didn't fall, the empire didn't tremble, the prophesied end never arrived, and the more time passed, the more it seemed like it never would. King Ahab died, yet Jezebel did not fall with him. She remained firm and influential. She survived the succession of her sons, still manipulates court decisions and controls alliances, still rules from behind the throne, even when the name on the crown isn't hers. Elijah's promise, now old, is buried under new decrees, new wars, new rituals. The idolatry she once introduced is now the empire's foundational structure. Corruption has become a cultural norm, moral and spiritual decay continue to thrive for years, her name, an apparently eternal legacy. The longer judgment delays, the greater the illusion of impunity. Jezebel, however, mistakes the delay for permission, and with that, the sentence hanging over her grows heavier, more inevitable. The Lord does not speak, but the silence is not empty, it is the breath held before the next word. Nothing stirs in the heavens, but everything continues to build below, slowly, relentlessly, and when the cup of God's wrath overflows, the crash will come like a debt long overdue, and no longer postponable, and it will finally be revealed that what was decreed did not lose strength with the passage of time, it gained weight, and time, which once seemed like a loyal ally, was merely the pause before the execution. Far from there, inside a stifling room, the prophet Elisha calls one of the prophets in training for an emergency meeting. What he has to say must stay between them. Without ceremony, the prophet instructs him to prepare for a journey, to hide a flask of oil, and to carry a message. At the same time, a war is unfolding between Israel and Syria at Ramoth-Gilead, and that's where he must go. Upon arrival, he finds the camp fully engaged in military routine. The man he seeks is there among the commanders, Jehu. He is alert but restless. The young prophet calls him aside for a private word. The room they enter is narrow and dimly lit. The messenger, checking to see if they were followed, quickly shuts the door. Without any formality, he reveals the flask of oil hidden under his cloak and uncaps it. As he pours the oil over the commander's head, he declares, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anoint you king over Israel, the Lord's people. You are to destroy the house of Ahab, your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel." Before the last drops fall, the young man confirms the prophecy. Jezebel will be devoured by dogs in a plot of land at Jezreel, and no one will bury her. The scent of the oil fills the air, and before Jehu can react, the door slowly shuts behind him. The messenger is gone, vanishing the moment his final word was spoken. Jehu stands alone, surrounded by the fragrance and the weight of a destiny he did not choose. The commander returns to the courtyard, and his face is no longer the same. The other men notice and wait. Finally, one officer asks what happened. Jehu's answer sparks an unusual reaction. The other commanders fall into line, lay out their official cloaks, sound the trumpet, and shout, leaving no room for doubt. Jehu is king. The next march is steady and synchronized. Each step carries the urgency of long overdue justice. Jehu rides, not toward the throne, but toward his true mission. His target has a name, and once it's fulfilled, the colors of the palace will no longer be gold. Somewhere between the sound of trumpets and the rhythmic gallop of horses, the royal court feels its foundations tremble, not because of invading armies, but because of something far more feared: the arrival of judgment. Jehu approaches without hesitation, driven by the urgency of a punishment that has waited too long to be delayed any further. High in the fortress, behind thick walls that had protected her for so long, Jezebel watches the commotion draw near. She knows that whatever is coming for her, and even that certainty doesn't drive her into hiding. With steady hands, she sits before the mirror. Her eyes, now more defined than ever, receive their ritual painting. Her hair is arranged, and her garments chosen with care. Jezebel prepares herself not to flee, but to be seen, seen as a queen, seen as a woman who still commands her own ending. She positions herself at the window with the posture of one who neither fears nor yields. Below, Jehu enters through the gate. Her words are sharp. "How are you, Zimri, murderer of your master?" The reference is a provocation. Zimri was a traitor, a usurper of the throne, who ruled only 7 days before taking his own life to avoid capture by Israel's army. Jezebel implies Jehu is the same, and will meet the same fate. She threatens with sarcasm, bluffing with a power that had long abandoned her. One final act, a last attempt to control the ending with the poison still flowing from her words. Jehu doesn't bother to answer. He simply lifts his eyes and asks, "Who is on my side?" From above, a few heads turn, court officials, silent witnesses to all that Jezebel built and destroyed. Now, this is the moment. Their hesitation lasts only seconds. The next instant, the queen is surrounded and thrown from the window. Her body cuts through the air with startling speed and strikes the ground with brutal force. The impact is final. The sheer velocity causes her body to collapse entirely, and the intense pressure bursts through flesh and muscle, spraying blood onto the palace walls and onto the horses of the troops, who trample her without pause. No scream was heard, no resistance, only the sound of judgment being carried out. The woman who adorned herself for the end did not foresee that her own servants would be the first to erase her image. No lament will be prepared in her memory, and when they return to gather her body for burial, they will see that no grave will need to be dug. The horses, their hooves stained with blood, slowly cross the threshold as the air fills with an unsettling calm. No orders are given immediately. The body still lies on the ground, and no servant hurries to retrieve it. Jehu doesn't stop there. He heads into the palace. The atmosphere he finds is not one of war, but of relief mixed with interrupted routine. He sits, eats, and drinks. While blood still trickles over the courtyard stones, he enjoys his meal with the confidence of one who knows there is no need to rush. Outside, the corpse, soaked in a red pool, attracts hungry, ravenous beings. The putrid scent reaches the wet, flared nostrils of wild dogs. With salivating jaws and ruthless teeth, they draw near, ready to tear into royal flesh and satisfy days of hunger. The feast begins, and their frenzy spares not even the garments. After the bread and wine, Jehu gives the order. "Go, bury that woman. After all, she was a king's daughter." Men under his command go out, but they return too quickly, and with nothing in hand. There is no funeral procession, no cloth to wrap the remains. All they find are fragments of what was once a human being. A skull, feet, and hands, nothing more. She is beyond recognition. Everything happened exactly as Elijah had said, exactly as it was prophesied. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh, and her remains will be scattered on the field like dung, so that no one will be able to say, "This is Jezebel." Every detail fulfilled with the precision of an ancient verdict that had simply awaited its moment. Without a grave, her memory is erased from existence. She won't even belong to the realm of the dead. She will be cast into oblivion as the final curse. She receives no mourning, no tomb, not even the dogs wanted all of her. The woman who lived surrounded by gold, who dictated laws amid perfumes and jewels, has now vanished, with no future and no memory, and the land that swallowed her, holds the bitterest taste in its depths. The dust has settled, her body was never buried, no mourning was heard in the courtyard, only the distant footsteps of those who survived that morning, and the permanent absence of someone who once believed herself eternal. But it's not Jezebel's end that haunts us, it's what survived her. The spirit that sustained her still walks free. It hides where vanity outshines truth, where power disguises itself as purpose, where the name of God is used as a shield for human ambition, where silence is mistaken for permission. She reigned adorned in jewelry, luxury, and desecrated altars, but she ended with no body, no name, and no grave. For someone like Jezebel, the highest price was not her fall, it was being forgotten, and no forgetting happens by accident. The apparent delay in judgment wasn't neglect, it was patience, a chance she ignored, a pause many today still confuse with victory, but they will discover it isn't. That is grace in motion, yet when that grace ends, what comes next will not be mere punishment, it will be final justice. And this is where the story reaches us, because Jezebel fell, but her example still lingers among us, in systems, in speeches, in actions, in egos that resist surrender. And that's why this story doesn't end with her fall, it continues with a question: how many still believe they can defy the Almighty, and when? If that question unsettles you, breathe easy, because the good news is, the end of this beastly queen doesn't have to be your end. By the Lord's mercy, there is still time, there is a path, and His name is Jesus Christ, and He still has forgiveness waiting for you to ask for it. Grace is still available for those who choose to abandon the altars of vanity and return to the God who never left His throne. If you enjoyed this content, leave a like and comment below what impacted you most. The good thing is, by doing so, YouTube will better understand what you like to watch, and it will show you more videos like this. And don't forget to keep walking this journey of deep and surprising revelations. Watch the video in the description and on the final screen. It reveals where else that same spirit tried to infiltrate, and what happened to those who stood against it. But above all, carry this truth with you: no throne raised against God will stand, no voice that defies heaven will prevail, and no divine silence is eternal. Judgment will come, but for those who choose to return to the Lord, judgment becomes deliverance. Rejoice, for this mighty God, the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, is on your side, and He still writes endings that save.